The second thing that is really important is this whole idea of savings. Because if you give 10% and save 10%, you will never lack. If you give 10% and save 10%, you will never lack. And the 10% that you're saving is really like paying yourself. Because let me just say it this way, you're the most important entity in your life. You are a wealth generator. Without you, things don't get bought. It ruins the economy. There's nobody to pay the electric bill. There's nobody to pay the rent. You are the most valuable entity in your life. So honor yourself by paying yourself first. Well, I mean, after you pay God. Give 10%, save 10%, absolutely will change your life. I remember when I was young, I started making money in business, and I remember I heard this principle, and I was like, why would I put 10% in the savings account? I can do better than that. And then I remember where I would go to the bank, the wealthiest people in our area always went there, and somehow we'd always be there together. And I always watch them. They'd put down a check, and they'd say 10% goes here in the savings. And I started thinking about it. I looked at their financial position, and I looked at mine. I said, you know what? This argument isn't working. They're way ahead of the game, and I'm still struggling, even though I was making money. So I started doing it, and I started to save the 10%, and I would never look at what my bottom line was. Because you know what happens when you see some money? You find a way to spend it. Something will come up, I promise you, that gives you the opportunity to spend it. Always will come up. It might be your car broke down. Or, you know what? If you didn't have it in savings, you'd figure out a way to do it. But if you have it in savings, you'll just pull it out of savings. So I used to put it in and not try to check the bottom line. There's a little book out. It's a small book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. Anybody ever read it here? The richest man in Babylon is all he did to become the richest man was save 10%. Made all the difference. So, and not only that, savings makes you liberated, makes you feel free. You're not bound by that job every day. That something happens if you got fired, there's provision. There's something about the savings that liberates you from a system that tries to keep you bound up. So learn how to do that. Pay yourself first. Honor God first, or honor God, and then pay yourself. Here's some saving principles. He talks about the ant. He said, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest." And this is my absolute favorite. Let Pharaoh do this. Now and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. Here's his point. Now there's that 20%. Now I'm saying 10 to God and 10 to, yourself. But here's the principle. There was about to be a famine. And Joseph had all the people give 20% to the kingdom. 20%, and they could live on 80. Do you know that in those 5 years, they collected so much wealth? They not only took care of themselves, they took care of nations, they took care of people around about, they took care of other people, just out of the 20%. And that's why I say, if you give 20% and save 20%, you'll absolutely never be in a financial crisis. Ever. It's a powerful story. Just read it, and it's like, after a while, it was amazing how much they had gathered up. All right, let's look. Then the next 30%, now this is according to regular standards, would be 30% would go to taxes. And taxes sort of like, income tax, sales tax, property tax, school tax, vehicle tax. And that can be shortened or it can be more depending on, where you're at. the government does provide a way that you don't have to pay that much tax through corporations or whatever. There's legal systems that you can put in. You never defraud the government, ever, of taxes, unless you want to spend time in jail. Never, ever defraud the government. It doesn't honor God. And why sit in prison for that? Why ruin your name? Why, it's a privilege to work in America. It's a privilege to live here or whatever country you're from. It's an honor to be able to produce wealth in that country. Be sure you pay your government, but don't pay them more than you have to. So there are systems, I make a lot of money, but I doubt it if I pay as much tax as you guys, because I have systems built and that's another, we'll go there some other time. But there's ways and avenues that you can not have to pay tax. I didn't say avoid paying taxes. I said to not have to pay it through legal systems. Jesus said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And also in Romans 13:7, that render therefore all their dues, taxes to whom taxes due, customs dues, customs due, fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. Now the next 35%, again, just according to standard. Now everybody's going to be a little bit different, but the next 35% is to committed debt. Now here's where the church gets in a lot of trouble, why God sometimes doesn't bless people, is because they don't pay their committed debt. Committed debt is like your home loan, your household expenses, your cell phone, water bill, sewer bill, credit card debt, car payments. In other words, when you make an agreement with someone that you'll pay this much every month, be it your cell phone, in your case, car payment, it's due when it's due. It's not due 5 days later. It's not due during the grace period, unless you really need grace in that period. But if you get in the habit of it, you always need grace. It's due when it's due. A credit card is fine as long as you pay it off. The thing that's bringing this whole economy down is this excessive credit card debt. And people making commitments and then not paying their bills. I was praying one time, I was in Kenya, and I was asking the Lord about this group of people. And I said, what's the thing that's holding back their poverty? And he said, they're robbing me by not tithing, and they're not paying a bill when it's due. That's the first time I ever thought about that. And it speaks of our integrity. Your credit score really speaks of your integrity. So if you have a bad credit score, a banker, before he lends you any money, is going to look at your credit score. Your credit score, you can prophesy and you can be as spiritual as you want to be. But when that guy looks at his credit score, he knows exactly who you are. He knows exactly your character. And we forget about that. And I've taken a lot of people and work with them in banks to buy houses and properties and things like that. And the most embarrassing thing is when I trust someone, I take them before a banker with the opportunity to borrow cash, and I find out that they have a 400-something credit card score. I mean, it makes me look bad. It's like the banker looks at me and says, I thought you recommended these. And I'm like, So now I don't take anybody in unless I know their credit score, because their credit card and their credit score speaks of their integrity. So the deal is this: whenever a bill is due, when it's due, it's due. It's not, I'm in business, been in business for 30-some years, 32 to be exact, and Christians are some of the worst people in paying their bills. They're just horrible. They don't, I've had Christians come in and buy stuff and never pay, ever. Just, you're blessed, and they just walk out, keep the stuff. You send them invoices, you try to, and they even go to my church. One of the craziest things I see is people who rip me off and then they're up front worshiping Jesus. It almost messes up my service. But it's happened. I had people rip me off over $1,000 or so and just come to church, act like nothing ever. I'm like, whatever. Them and Jesus had to work that one out. So be sure that when you commit to something, keep your word. Pay your bills. Now, if by some, I won't take any condemnation off here, because if for some reason you got yourself in a situation, like I had an uncle that went bankrupt, and so he had to declare bankruptcy. I know two people that did this. They made a commitment to the people they owed the money to that they would pay him back in their lifetime. So in other words, sometimes we fall in times where we can't pay, but our integrity will always stand for us. We'll be able to, you'll pay it back. People know. You may not be able to pay it back with interest, but you pay back your debt. Always pay back your debt. Even if you have to declare bankruptcy, I still think in some cases it's your responsibility. Now, I think sometimes it gets out of hand, something happens, it's not necessarily your fault, you get in a situation, but as much as you're able. Look at this, the scripture says, it's the reasons why people of God are not blessed. They're thieves and covenant breakers. They make promises and take false oaths, look at this scripture, and make agreements. Therefore, lawsuits spring up like poisonous weeds in a plowed ground. Isn't that awesome? Because you see that in America. All these lawsuits are because people, I'll agree to pay this, just give me the money, I'll make sure I pay, and then after that they don't pay. Or they have a contract, like professionals, they get a contract to play baseball for $80 million, and then decide about halfway through it's not good enough, and they want to move it up to $100 million. So it's your lack of integrity. That's all it is. Regardless of what the market can pay you, you had an agreement to play 4 years of baseball at this price, pay it out, keep your integrity. Nehemiah 9:8. You performed your words, you're righteous. All right, let's keep looking here. The last 15% is what I call variable. Remember, all these can be adjusted according to where you are.